Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so excited to welcome author Tiya Miles to talk about her debut novel, The Cherokee Rose, a novel of gardens and ghost. In The Cherokee Rose, 3 women uncover the secrets of a Georgia plantation that embodies the intertwined histories of Indigenous and enslaved Black communities. Now, in this episode, Tiya and I talk about the republication of her debut novel, and we also touch on another book of hers entitled All That She Carried. We learn more about Tiya's writing and reading life, plus we get some great book recommendations. But before we get into the episode, please take a quick second and leave the podcast a 5-star rating and review, because it's a great way to show your support. It opens up new opportunities for the show, helps us find new listeners, and it keeps me and the podcast going. So thanks in advance. And now on to the episode with author Tiya Miles. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me to talk about her debut novel, The Cherokee Rose, a novel of gardens and ghost, is history professor and author Tiya Miles. Hi Tiya, welcome to the Reader's Couch.
Hey Victoria, so happy to be here.
Yay, I'm so excited to have you on. Really enjoyed The Cherokee Rose. But before we get into details about the book, I know this isn't your first book, but it's your debut novel. How are you feeling now that it's republished and it's available for a new set of eyes and readers?
I am feeling over the moon. I'm so excited about this novel, about the thinking and writing that went into it, and about its chance to have a new life in this moment.
Absolutely. I love when books have new lives breathed into them, whether it's a new cover, whether it's a revised edition. I'm really excited about it. So I want readers to hear straight from you. What's your elevator pitch? Tell us about The Cherokee Rose and what can readers expect when they pick up a copy?
Well, the first part of my pitch will be that I love the new cover. You just mentioned new covers, Victoria. And with this cover, I had the chance to work with my editor who's working with artists to really bring to life a picture that I had in my head about this story years before I even wrote it. And that was the picture of a young Black woman walking up a hill covered in beautiful, in-bloom, colorful flowers toward a rather imposing plantation house. I saw that image in my mind just years ago, Victoria. It just popped into my head as I was doing my own on-the-ground, on-site research at plantation houses in the South. And at the time, I didn't know who the young woman was or what the story would be. It's just a picture that stayed with me. And The Cherokee Rose is a novel about that young woman whose name became Ruth, and 2 other young women who all find themselves being drawn to an old plantation house in the state of Georgia, which used to be Cherokee territory, lands belonging to the Cherokee Nation. They don't know what brought them there. They don't even know what they are in for once they have arrived. But the story is really about the power of place and history to shape the lives of individuals and to shape relationships. And so all of these women who are named Ruth, Jinx, and Cheyenne find themselves coming together at the Cherokee Rose, this old plantation, which is actually haunted and changing as a result.
Wow. Well, first off, I want to say I'm glad you got the cover you wanted. It's so amazing. I love it. I think it's incredibly stunning. I want us to dive into the 3 characters, but first things first. Has anything changed in terms of text from the first edition in comparison to the one we have now? Because I think your first book that was released in 2015.
That's right. It was. And quite a lot has changed. I had the chance to revise the novel from beginning to end in terms of the pacing of the story and of what happens when, in terms of some added characterization to the women in the story. There's actually a different ending than there had been previously, and there are new scenes. And so it was really wonderful to have the time to reflect on the story as it had existed when it first came out in 2015, comments and feedback that I received from readers back then and over the years, and some pretty recent political occurrences in the Cherokee Nation as I revised the novel.
Right. Okay, so that's good to know. So listeners, if you happened to read the previous edition from 2015, revisit this one in 2023. Let's talk about the characters though. So I want us to start with, let's start with Jinx. Let's start with Jinx first. She is a part-time librarian, newspaper columnist, doing research on a missionary school. And she ends up at this plantation. She discovers, the house and that it's going up for auction. So she's going there to research, really at first, the missionary school, but also to find out what happened to a student who was in attendance there. So let's talk about Jinx, who she is, what's going on in her life before arriving at the house where she meets the other women.
Jinx is a character that I absolutely love. I adore Jinx, and she is someone who is really based on my own previous experience as a graduate student and my observation of women graduate students over the many years that I have been a professor. Jinx is somebody who has had to learn how to really bring together her own identity and her own background as an Indigenous young woman. She is Muskogee Creek and also Cherokee, with her desire to study history and with her desire to come closer to the past, in a context in which academia has really not always been very welcoming and understanding of the ways in which people with different identities might have ideas and views of history that don't really align well with the more traditional kind of strict academic viewpoint. So Jinx has struggled with this feeling of disjuncture between her own identity, her own personal and community calling as a tribal historian, and what university history departments and scholars say that she should be doing. And so the story starts with Jinx where she is in her home in Oklahoma, and really finds her as somebody who feels confused about what her path should be, pulled in different directions, and a little bit like she has failed herself, because her initial dream had been to become a PhD historian and a professor and a writer, and she had ended up back at home working part-time at a library that is critical and crucial to her community, where she's doing very good work, but it's not the work of her heart. And so Jinx is really enmeshed in community. She is in love with history because her great aunt taught her about the importance of tribal history. And she ends up responding to an elder community member's demand, really, that she take up a certain historical question, which is going to open her own eyes about limitations that she didn't know she had with regard to Native American history and her own tribal nation's position within it. And this is what sets her off, heading eastward to the former lands of the Cherokee Nation to study this student at a missionary school who had disappeared from the historical record.
Right. And also we have Cheyenne, who is considering purchasing, well, actually, she won the bid to purchase Cherokee Rose, and she has plans for it and also hopes of connecting back with her roots. Tell us about her.
Cheyenne is the character that many readers of the previous version of the Cherokee Rose told me that they just attached themselves to in both positive and negative ways, and often in ways that felt contradictory to them. Because Cheyenne is that woman who other women kind of resent and envy because she's beautiful, she's sophisticated, she's confident, she's rich, she's accomplished. And within an African American cultural context and many Black cultural contexts, around the world, Cheyenne has characteristics that have, in a very troubling way, been elevated. So Cheyenne is light-skinned, she has long, straight hair, and these are characteristics that sadly and very painfully, even within Black communities, have been prized over darker skin and curlier hair, in part because these characteristics are further removed from generally associated traits that we have with Blackness. I mean, just to put it plainly, these characteristics are more associated with white beauty norms. And Cheyenne, as a character, knows these things about herself. She knows that she has these qualities that make her stand out, and she has taken full advantage of it. She's the kind of person who maybe some of us might love to hate a little bit. And Cheyenne gets it in her mind that she must have the Cherokee Rose, the plantation house, which is the setting for the story, because she believes that her family is descended from Cherokee people. And she attributes the things that she thinks are wonderful about herself to this Cherokee ancestry, which she had heard about from her grandmother. And because Cheyenne has the means, and because she will never let anybody stand in the way of her achieving her goals and getting what she wants, she does place a bid to try to get hold of this plantation house. She thinks that it and everything else in the world should belong to her. And she wants to redesign the plantation house as a luxury bed and breakfast because that is her career. She is an interior designer, and she basically has designs on the world, and she thinks she knows better than anybody else how the world should look and how people should be and live within it. And so Cheyenne and Jinx, when they come together, don't mix very well. They are two headstrong women who know quite a lot and who don't quite realize yet what it is that they don't know about themselves and about their place in the world relative to other women who might come from different backgrounds.
Right, absolutely. It's so interesting to hear the reactions readers had initially to Cheyenne, because I kind of felt the same way. I was like, she's an unlikable character, but I can't look away. I am gravitated to her personality and how she shows up on the page. But also there is Ruth, who happens to know Cheyenne. Ruth is a magazine writer, is Cheyenne's childhood friend, and she shows up to write a story about the plantation house. So tell us about Ruth.
Ruth is the young woman who I described as first seen just in my imagination back in a time when I was doing a lot of research on plantations. She popped into my head as a person who was being sort of drawn to this house. As I said before in our conversation, kind of drawn up a slope past beautiful flowers in bloom toward this old plantation house, and she doesn't know why. And I knew when I saw that image in my mind that Ruth was somebody who was vulnerable, that she was somebody who was a little bit lost, who was seeking something, seeking perhaps a way to belong, a place to belong, that she was someone in need of a change in her life. And she didn't know what that change was going to be. She didn't know what that space of belonging might be, or even really why she'd ended up there. But there she was in this new place, and standing on the precipice of meeting new people who would help her to see herself anew. And Ruth is somebody who, over the course of the two revisions of the novel, really did change Victoria. Because I think when I first wrote Ruth, I knew that she was hurting. I knew that she was somebody who was dealing with family trauma that just wouldn't let her go and that she couldn't let go of. But I didn't really have a sense of how it was that she was dealing with that pain. And in the revised version, I spent more time with Ruth in my mind and tried to really capture deeper and more facets of her personality. I tried to think about how it is that she was using writing to actually bury her feelings and to bury what it is that she actually knew about her family dynamics. And Ruth, in this revision, comes together with Cheyenne, who has also been revised in this version of the novel, and really clashes with her because of the past they have together, but also because of the ways in which they need each other that none of them would be willing to admit before they arrive at the Cherokee Rose. So Ruth has to change. She is the person who is most in need of change in the novel. And luckily, she's going to have a guide. She's going to have a spirit guide, in a sense, to help her to move through this very difficult phase in her life, which is a phase of transformation.
Right. Okay, it's so interesting. Now, see, I want to go back to the original. I'll see if I can find a copy because I would love to see how much Ruth has changed, like where she was before and where she is now. But I'm curious though, and I know it's difficult for writers to kind of pick favorites, but who would you say was your favorite character to revise or get to learn or know more or discover on the page?
Oh, yes, that is hard. I mean, I'm attached to each of these women, and I'm attached to them in their relationships with each other. I'm attached to the historical figures in the novel, which we haven't even had a chance to touch on yet. I just love them all. But if I did have to pick one person, I really think that it would be Jinx. And why? I mean, I think it's because Jinx is the scholar, she is the historian in the group, and she is responding to what I think is a very high calling, that is a request from the community member to search out the truth. And she answers it when many people wouldn't. Many people would just turn their backs, focus on their own agenda. And Jinx doesn't do that. She takes a number of risks in the novel in terms of her professional life, in terms of her thinking about herself, in terms of her understanding of historical race relations and how she's located within those relations, and in terms of her intimate life. And I really admire her for that.
Yeah, I can see that. So the first book I read from you was All That She Carried, which I know is incredibly popular. I hope, listeners, you've all read this one by now, but don't worry. If you haven't, I highly recommend. I can't even find the words. It's just so incredible how this one thing, it went from a mother to her daughter, they were separated, and just how through just everything, this one thing, I'm not going to say, and story survived in the way that it did. And it's so funny because I just had a conversation about history, particularly within the Caribbean, and us trying to trace our ancestry. And most of us, we get stuck with the living relatives we know, and then the relatives those living relatives knew. And, we don't really have that necessary connection. But needless to say, again, I loved All That She Carried. And for listeners who are not familiar, could you just share with them what that book is about and what they can expect?
Yes, and thank you for loving All That She Carried, Victoria. I really appreciate that. That's such a special book to me. It's a book that I never expected to write. The topic kind of fell into my lap through a conversation with a local journalist down in Savannah, Georgia. And it is a history about an object, and also a history about multiple generations in an enslaved family. The history follows especially three women, though there is a fourth woman who is discussed as part of their family line, who came out of enslavement in South Carolina in the 1850s and had a terrible thing happen to them, which was extremely dramatic in their lives, but unfortunately was quite common in the U.S. slaveholding South. And that is the separation of a mother and a child through sale. The mother in All That She Carried was Rose. Her daughter was Ashley. And of course, this is a history. These were real, living, breathing, feeling people. And once Rose and Ashley were separated, they never saw each other again. When Rose found out that Ashley was going to be sold away, she did something that I think is incredible, and that is she thought, she planned, she took action, and she did her best to provide her daughter with what she thought her daughter would need to be able to survive their separation. And the story of how Rose reacted, what she thought to do, what she managed to get a hold of, what she gave to Ashley, how that gift changed Ashley's life, how Ashley then passed that on, and how we even know about it is the story of all that she carried. And I think a very powerful and moving example as and can look like even in the worst of circumstances.
Absolutely. It's truly a story, I feel, of love and resilience and creativity, resourcefulness. I mean, having the frame of mind that Rose did prior to being separated from Ashley, just, I can't even, but I was just so grateful for this story. I think it's incredibly powerful. So again, listeners, if you haven't already, All That She Carried, I personally highly recommend. And thank you so much for sharing. I'm curious, not to be too greedy, but are you working on any other projects?
I'm always working on, it feels like too many projects because there are so many compelling historical events, historical figures, contemporary experiences out there to explore. My next book is going to be out actually in a month, Victoria. Yeah, in a month. This is a book called Wild Girls: How the Outdoors Shaped the Women Who Challenged a Nation. And it's an exploration of girls who became women who are, for the most part, very well known. People like Harriet Tubman, people like Louisa May Alcott, and how these girls spent many of their waking hours outside as children, and within that context, within that space outdoors, learned new things about themselves and were able to develop skills that they then used to challenge their societies.
Wow. Okay. I am adding this one to my list as we speak.
All right.
No, I'm literally in my notes. I have it now. Wild Girls: How the Outdoors Shaped the Women Who Challenged a Nation. Okay. Super, super exciting. Okay. So, Tiya, I am really curious. You have your debut novel. I just asked you kindly to share All That She Carried. And now I'm super excited to know that Wild Girls is also on the horizon. If you could tell your younger self anything, Tiya, what would you tell her?
I would tell her to keep writing. Just keep writing. When I was a girl in grade school, I knew that I loved thinking thoughts, having ideas, crafting them via words into all kinds of formats. But I wasn't so sure that I'd be able to do that as a career for many years of my life. And now I feel just so grateful and so happy and so privileged to be able to do this. And I would tell my little girl self, don't give up. And I would tell that to anyone who has a story within her.
Yes, absolutely. Don't give up. Our stories need to be told. Everyone's stories need to be told, especially those who've over time and years have been just suppressed and not given space. So yes, especially for those folks listening, just keep going at it. I want to get into your reading life a bit, though. So I know we're here to chat about your book, The Cherokee Rose, but I want to know what you're reading. So share with our listeners the last book or books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
I find myself reading multiple books over the same period of time and listening to them in different formats. And it's probably a little bit bizarre, but I read my books in hardcover or paperback. I read my books online, and I also listen to audiobooks all the time. And I sometimes divide books for work and pleasure into those different modes of interacting with the books. So one book that I read this summer is kind of a surprise. It was a surprise to me. It might be a surprise to listeners. And that's the book Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Ooh.
This book is a romance between two young men who are involved in politics in the US and in England and Great Britain. And I almost don't even know why I picked this book up or how it came, into my awareness. But I thought that it was such a surprising and fresh and fun summer read, especially because I am halfway a political junkie. And so I'm always listening to, podcasts and radio shows about what's going on in national and international politics.
Mm-hmm.
And this novel, in a surprising way, is all about politics. And it's all about red state, blue state politics in the US and about having hope for political change. But it's really wonderfully packaged as an escapist romance.
Ooh, love it. So now I'm curious. You mentioned podcast. What podcast do you listen to? I guess, for news.
I listen to the various National Public Radio podcasts for news. I listen to the Ezra Klein show, which I like very much. And right now he's taking a leave to write a book. I kind of miss him a little bit. And I also listen to various environmental podcasts. I think that these are mostly put out by independent outfits. So I listen to one that's called For the Wild. I listen to one that's called The Great Simplification. I listen to a feminist podcast called The Waves on Slate, which is a lot of fun and helps me to keep up with popular culture issues. And I have just a range of things that I listen to every once in a while.
Oh, I love that. Thanks for sharing. What would you say was your favorite childhood book that you can remember?
I have so many favorite childhood books, but what comes immediately to mind is A Wrinkle in Time by My Little Lingle. I loved her novels. I think, I was in grade school when our wonderful teacher, I think this is 4th or 5th grade, read us A Wrinkle in Time aloud. And I still remember those moments. I looked forward to those moments every day when we could just sit quietly at our desk and hear her voice reading us this amazing story. After she read it to us, I had a chance to go to our public library and to check the book out for myself. And over time, I was gifted the book by my parents. And then I just kept reading Madeline L'Engle. And as she was writing for older kids and teens, I was following her novels. So another person I remember loving as a kid or teen was called A Ring of Endless Light.
Ring of Endless Light. Okay. I love hearing about the books that kind of formed us as readers when we were much younger. And in this case, you're now a writer. So it's so amazing. What books are you looking forward to reading in the year ahead? So what's on your nightstand?
Well, I tend to return to books that are important to me intellectually or personally. Mm-hmm. And one book that I will be returning to very soon is a memoir and also a study of environmental interrelationships, the ties between people and environments, written by Lorette Savoy. The book is called Trace, and it is absolutely beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's her meditation about the importance of various places in her life, and it is centered around her insight, which, when I say it, is going to sound like, of course, this is true, but it's one of those deep truths that we often just walk right past. Her insight that everything takes place, that everything requires place, everything requires the earth and the ways in which we interpret it and move upon it and through it as human beings.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, I have to ask you this because it's a topic within the book community and amongst readers, is about the concept of reading books and revisiting books. So I love the fact that you revisit books that are both, important to you on an intellectual level, professional level, but also personal level. So I love hearing this. Tell me about your choice to revisit these books when there are just so many other books out there to be read as well. Do you feel guilty or are you happy doing it? I mean, I'm a rereader, but my listeners are sick of hearing me in my case for rereading books. But I'm curious. Tell us about your choice, Tiya.
Fact, Victoria, that we only have enough life in us to read so many books. We're always making time trade-offs. And that is the truth. I have so many books queued up on my Kindle and next to my desk and beside my bed. And I keep, scraps of papers of lists of books that people recommend for me. I know that I will probably only ever get to a third of them, and that does make me sad. And yet, I feel that each time I come back to a book that I've read before, I have changed, and therefore the book has changed. And I can find new, compelling elements in those books that didn't occur to me before. And the new treasures that I find in those books can be just as astonishing and eye-opening and life-changing as the original treasures that I found years ago. And I want to give you an example. I want to give you two examples of that, because these examples are maybe even a little bit strange, because these are about books that I struggled to read the first time. The two examples are Toni Morrison's novel, Beloved, and Octavia Butler's novel, Parable of the Sower. In each of these cases, when these books were put before me in some context, so for Beloved, it was in a class when I was in college, and for Parable of the Sower, it was in a reading group when I was working at a feminist bookstore that I loved. One of my best jobs ever, by the way. But these books were put before me, and I started them, and I actually couldn't finish them. I couldn't finish either Beloved or Parable of the Sower at the time, because they deal with such deep and serious and dark themes. Slavery, the abuse of Black women, haunting and pain, and ecological and societal collapse, and sexual vulnerability and abuse, and the question of whether or not human communities can actually overcome and survive such disruptions. In each case, I could not finish the novel. And in each case, it took me years, but I'm not exaggerating, Victoria, years to pick the novel up again. In the case of Beloved, I picked it up again in graduate school because I simply had to read it if I was going to continue to do the historical work that I was doing on Black women and slavery. And in the case of Parable of the Sower, I picked it up again because I knew that it was a novel for our times. I had no idea that Parable of the Sower would actually be critically important to the way in which I could write all that she carried. I did not see a link, but it ended up being exactly a novel that I needed to revisit at the time that I did. Rereading Parable of the Sower completely opened up for me the possibilities of the interpretations that I arrive at and all that she carried, and I couldn't have predicted it. So I think rereading is just as important as picking up a book for the very first time.
Man, you have made a case here today, and thank you for it, because I do agree we change, there's some books I've read before, in my younger years, and they're cringe. They're also books I couldn't finish, but they're also books that I read and loved, and I discovered new things. I'm also a different person. I've grown. Life has given me different experiences. So yes, I couldn't agree with you more. I love the examples of Beloved and Parable of the Sower, because those are two incredible books, but I get it, because I went on a journey reading Morrison and I needed breaks.
Mm-hmm.
I really did. I needed space, but when I was able to come back, it was beautiful. I feel that way actually about The Bluest Eye. That was hard for me.
Yes.
It was hard. I think when I got to Beloved, I was a bit more ready, if that makes sense. I was a bit more ready, but yes, I can relate to revisiting sometimes when the time is right or with renewed eyes. But sometimes, don't give up on that book. Don't give up.
Don't give up. That's right.
Absolutely. So coming back to the Cherokee Rose, again, this book was written first, 2015. It has a brand new, beautiful cover, revised this year for 2023. What are you now hoping? Because I remember you mentioned earlier about readers who had read the first iteration and the thoughts they shared. And I'm sure you've seen some thoughts from readers with this new edition. But in an ideal world, what are you hoping readers might think or feel after they've turned the last page?
I love the question. I hope that readers will turn the last page and feel that they have arrived into a space of healing, rejuvenation, and community. And I hope that they will know that this is possible for us in our real lives, just as it is for the characters in the Cherokee Rose.
Absolutely. I love this. Tiya, thank you so much for making time and coming on the show and speaking with me. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, from me too, Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.